when, how, and why we should use video in ethical, responsible ways that help further our movements rather than bringing them down. So just to start off, why do we use film in movement storytelling? Does anybody want to popcorn out some reasons that we might choose to use film? Well, a few things that I came up with are, oh gosh, share my screen again, are we might be moving someone to feel something, maybe about something they don't know a lot about, persuading someone to learn something about an issue that we know is important, or protecting ourselves and our community by sharing what's happening with the broader world to add a measure of safety at a protest or something like that. But that brings us to a really important question. Film can help to keep us safe sometimes, but it can also add an element of risk when we put things on the internet. So when everybody's just going around taking photos and putting things on Instagram, that can definitely put people at more risk at an event like that. So how do we balance that desire to keep ourselves safe and that element of risk that film can bring? And I think that's especially important with the wave of Black Lives Matter protests that's been happening, and it just raises a lot of ethical concerns about using film, because for a lot of people in cities around the country, the stakes are getting higher. People are being charged with outrageous charges sometimes for a variety of actions. And in Salt Lake City, we're seeing people being targeted, being charged more than a month after after an event happened. So we know authorities are screening videos that they've taken or that they've found. And so as, you know, if we are filmmakers, of course, we want to be really careful not to put out images into the world that could potentially harm our community. And at the same time, film's still a very powerful tool in our toolkits. So let's think through some ways that we can use it wisely. Does anybody have some ideas about when filming might be okay? About how we decide if it's the right time to film something or not? If you want to just popcorn out some thoughts about that.
Yeah.
Or yeah, if you want to say something in the chat too, feel free to popcorn out thoughts that way. What might be some criteria for when it's maybe okay to film at a certain event? Yeah, when cops are involved, yes, by all means, film the cops and police brutality. That is a great point. Yeah, another great point. If the organizers have asked you to. Yeah. Or maybe if you've volunteered and have enthusiastic consent from the organizers. Yeah. And also, you want to consider the risk level, the type of action it is, if it's something that people would want to have broadcast into the world or not. And also, if people are consenting to it, it's not always possible to get widespread consent from the whole group, of course, but if you have consent from an organizing body, and if people have an expectation that they're going to be on film there, and that it's not going to be a private event. So yeah, I like to consider all three of those things, because if you just consider consent, there might be a lot of people who are very new and have no idea about security culture. So I think it's our responsibility to use our own best judgment as well as getting consent when possible. Oh, sorry, just trying to screen share again. Okay, so here are a few principles for filming safely and ethically that I came up with. Getting footage other than people's faces is usually a good thing, not just focusing on faces, especially in this day and age. Not assuming that everything is totally fair game in a so-called green zone or safe zone and in an action. And why is that? Does anybody have thoughts about why that might be?
Could you explain what a green zone is? Like, does that just mean like everyone has consent or has given consent?
Yeah, green zone is sort of a phrase for like a safer area in an action. Like if there are different things going on in different places, and if there's like a red zone, that might be where people are forming a blockade and doing something that could result in arrest. And orange zone is kind of somewhere in between. Maybe they're in the street, but they're not like physically blockading something. And then the green zone is maybe people on the sidewalk holding signs and doing things like that. So, so yeah, it might seem like it's totally safe to film people that are standing around holding banners and things in a green zone, but why could that potentially be problematic as well, and depending on what kind of action it is? One thing that happens is that people sometimes move back and forth from one area to another. So it's possible that somebody might have been on film somewhere else, and if you film showing their face, and even if somebody had video of them where their face is blurred in this other scene, but they're wearing the same clothes, that could be really problematic. Yeah, if that links them to something else that was going on in the same area. So, so yeah, just be careful about things like that.
I noticed in the chat, I think Micaiah shared being identified by law enforcement through clothing.
Oh, thanks. Thanks. It's trying to bounce back and see the chat, but it's a little tricky.
Yeah, that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, that's a really great point. Working with the crew is a good practice too, or at least having a buddy just for your own safety. You'll also be able to cover more angles, but yeah, keeping tabs on where your buddy is and leaving together when you're ready to leave. And then training your camera on the cops that police brutality is happening is a good practice for sure. Make sure that you're focusing on what they are doing and yeah, the injustices that they are responsible for. Oh. And then there's a whole range of other kinds of footage that we can get to that will also liven up any media that we create from an event too. So what are some other kinds of shots that you all can think of other than shots that show people's faces?
Besides filming the, hey, my name is Zach, my pronouns are they, them, good to be with y'all. Thanks for organizing this so much. Yeah, I guess I've been, yeah, obviously filming lots from behind of protesters, filming like feet sometimes, definitely filming cops as much as possible. Like lots of signs and just trying to angle the shots so that they aren't capturing people's faces.
Yeah, absolutely. All great ideas. Anybody else? Yeah, things like people's hands doing things like a banner drop or carrying a flag, or like you mentioned, props like banners, puppets. That's another great way to show someone who's animated and something that's eye-catching, but without showing someone's identity. People shown from behind or really unfocused images. You show like a couple seconds of that. Again, that's probably best in less risky scenarios, and then B-roll of location shots and stuff like that. So, yeah, all good alternatives that'll also make your video more dynamic and engaging too. Yeah, and then also some tactics for filming the police if you are in a scenario where there's police escalation. Things that you can do to make sure you get the best shots possible are focusing your camera again on what they're doing, getting footage of what their hands are doing, getting close-ups of badges and helmet numbers. And when you do that, it's good to start from a wider angle and then zoom in so you can see that that badge number belongs to that specific person. And if they don't have badges, because say they're riot cops or something, as we've seen recently in Salt Lake, riot cops without badges, they might have helmet numbers. You could get identifying info that way potentially. Look for anything on their person that could potentially be some identifying marker. Document weapons that they're holding or using. The organization Witness has a lot of great info on filming for or documenting human rights abuses. And I found their info on filming cops and other things like that really helpful. They advocate for if you need to narrate, stick to a just a facts approach. Don't add lots of opinionated commentary, but instead just if you need to clarify something that's going on because it's a chaotic scene, just keep it minimal and explain that briefly. Because if your footage needed to be used as evidence at some point, or if you realize right after the event, like, oh, I should hand this over to an attorney, that's the best thing to do with it, then it'll be more usable in court that way. And try to hold your footage for at least 10 seconds. Pan much more slowly than you need to if you need to move the camera from one spot to another. I've noticed that looking back at things that I've filmed, I usually pan much more quickly than I think I am. So yeah, especially in those chaotic situations, really try to remind yourself to slow down, be still, and yeah, keep the faster, jerky motions to a minimum. And then if you have 2 or more cameras to get different angles, that can be really valuable. Because if somebody gets in front of your camera, your buddy might get the shot that you need. So, and as far as keeping your footage secure, does anybody have any thoughts on best practices? Yeah, for doing that, for keeping your footage secure throughout an action and afterward? Or what are some things you can do as you're preparing to go or while you're there that can help make it sure that nobody can access your footage who shouldn't be able to.
I think someone shared in the chat password protection on your devices, such as encrypting your hard drives and protecting or disabling location services.
Absolutely, yeah, great points. Yes, by all means, lock your phone with a password. Don't have anything sensitive on it that you wouldn't want a cop to see. And if you're using devices that you can just pop the SD card out of, if you've gotten some really important shots and you're kind of like near the front, especially if you feel like you're in a vulnerable area where if they start arresting lots of people, you could be snatched. You might consider having a buddy take SD cards off site to get them to a secure location so that isn't lost. Even if say that did happen and you got bailed out fairly quickly, it's not guaranteed that your camera would get bailed out. I once had a camera stuck in jail for 8 or 9 months in the evidence room. And so that's not a situation you want to be in, especially if you have something that you really need to share with the world or with a lawyer. And then always transfer your files in person if you can, rather than involving the internet. If you do need to involve the internet, use a secure platform to transfer, like Sync. But yeah, it's always best if you can just work with your media buddy in person and not have to worry about that. And then what should you do with footage of a protest when you're done producing a piece from it? Like if you produce a short piece with some clips from that footage, but you have 3 hours of stuff that is from that day. What should you do with that? Yeah, get rid of it. Yeah, there's no reason to have it sitting around. Yeah, the best thing to do is get rid of it, reformat your cards, and why is that? So if you have a lot of sensitive footage and you get subpoenaed for it down the road, yeah, exactly. So it can't be used to incriminate anyone, someone said. Yeah, if you got a subpoena for it down the road, especially because you produced a short media piece from the event, you could get in a lot more trouble for getting rid of it at that point. So just, yeah, getting rid of it as soon as possible is best practices. Yeah, and what that would mean is if the court wanted to see what you have, because they know that you have footage from the event, then they can summon you to give it to them, basically. So you don't want to put yourself in that position. Yeah, and also if you think you might use something as evidence and you want to pass it along to a lawyer or something like that, don't edit the file in any way. Don't even change the file name, is what the organization witness says. Just keep it exactly as it is, and that way they can't say that anybody messed with the file or anything like that. Okay, and say you've say you've covered an event, say you and a media buddy have been filming for 3 hours at an event, and you get back home and you're ready to think through what to do with what you've filmed. What are some things that you should be thinking about at that point? Or what are some questions that might help you figure out how to move forward with it, or if to move forward with it? Well, I would ask myself, were the tone of the events and what actually happened different than what I expected? Was it basically the kind of action you thought it would be, or did things change dramatically? And that is always a question that people who do film and other media work should be asking themselves as they try to publicize events. In some cases, you might need to dial back what you were planning because it's not really a good idea to release it into the world anymore. And in other cases, it might be totally fine. So yeah, it's like you had consent to film at one particular type of event, but if that changed dramatically, then that's something definitely to consider. Also, getting multiple eyes on your footage before sharing it, and even as you're deciding what pieces from it to share, is a really good idea, because often there's so much going on that it helps to have a team of people who are working on that.
And Jessica shared in the chat as well, maybe if there's people's faces that are visible.
Yeah, great point. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And that brings us to another point too. I would say don't let face blurring technology give you a false sense of security. And anyone have thoughts on why that might be?
That reminds me of an instance when I think 2 journalists were accused, and I'm in so-called New York, and Lenape-Hoking, and 2 journalists were accused of throwing Molotov cocktails as a result of like I think there was blurred footage that was released, maybe somehow, but the police identified them through Etsy, through like their clothes that they were wearing, and now they're in jail in a time when there's a pandemic.
Wow.
Sorry, that's intense.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, exactly. People can be identified in all sorts of ways, like through their clothing. And so, yeah, I think people too often think that face blurring is safer than it really is. And also, machine learning is getting better and better. So there's the potential for computers to decode what the faces actually look like. And I was reading an article from 2016 that was talking about that. And so if that was becoming more possible, then imagine how much further things are now, or where things could be in a year or two. So yeah, I think we have to also think in terms of what could be possible not too far down the road. And if something is high profile enough, or if particular activists are being targeted, and charged with outrageous things, there's just more of a chance that that the cops are going to be looking at or really trying to decode those faces and figure out who is in those scenes. And I think there might be times when it's fine to blur faces if it's just like a regular old march and you just don't want to, you just want to respect people's privacy. And if it's like an event where there's nothing risky happening, and yeah, you just want to like keep faces off the internet. Not that it shouldn't be used, but yeah, just that it shouldn't be relied upon to protect people from repression. Because yeah, I think there's a lot of risk in thinking that way. Yeah, and again, if you do blur faces and show something more extreme happening, then there's a pretty good chance, I think, of being subpoenaed for that footage. So just be aware of that as well.
And I think Jessica brought up a good point, which I think Melanie touched on earlier, that filming cops instead of protesters is a suggestion that they've heard.
Oh yeah, thanks. Absolutely. Yeah. That is definitely a great practice. Yeah, I can't emphasize that enough. If there's police escalation going on, keep your camera focused on the cops and what they are doing. Yeah, at that point, that's the most important thing. So. Okay, so that was pretty heavy. Oh, let's all, if you want, take a collective breath. And all that being said, how about now we have some collaborative brainstorming in smaller groups about different kinds of narratives we can share that might not be as risky as footage from a protest. So let's see how many people we have. We have, let's see, 9 participants. If we want to get in, or actually Lyrica, how do we get into groups of maybe like 3 or
Okay.
3?
Well, I think I'm gonna do one group of, would you like to be in the group, Melanie?
Yeah, I can be in a group.
Okay. Do you want to like switch in and out of the groups?
Sure.
Okay. So I'm gonna put 3 to a group. And then I'm gonna put you in one group, and then when you'd like to come out, you'll see a little button down below where you can come back into this space where I'll just be chilling, and I'll put you in the other one.
Awesome. Thank you.
So the rest of you should be getting a notification that you'll be joining a breakout group.
And yeah, let's just talk through some different kinds of short video pieces that you could create that center on an issue that you care about.
Okay. You all should be getting an invitation to join your breakout rooms just about now.
Awesome.
Pete, are you there? Pete Stellaria? Hi, Taylor. Not sure if you can hear me. We are in breakout rooms right now if you'd like to join a breakout room.
Hey, we want to bring back everybody.
Yeah, I'll just let the other group know that they're gonna come back in a couple minutes. Is that? I'll say about 2 minutes.
Okay, that sounds good.
Hi, Zahira, did you just join us?
Yeah, I just did. Sorry about that.
No, you're totally good. So folks just went into breakout rooms to discuss a discussion question, but I'm gonna bring them back in just about right now.
Okay, I'll just wait then.
Okay, sounds good.
I know. Yeah. But do you record La Estrada? Oh, yeah.
Cool. I think everyone is back, and also we have a new participant that just jumped in as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Hey, everyone. Hope you had good conversations in the breakouts. Would one person from each breakout session like to share some of the ideas that you came up with? Feel free to just shout them out or type them.
Yeah, I can share from breakout group 1. So what we talked about a lot in this breakout group was just various films that I guess like center whiteness and like how to combat those narratives. So for like me personally, I brought out Into the Wild, which is like this film of this white guy who like burned all the money he had in his bank account, like his Ivy League degree, and returned to like this so-called wilderness. And I just like, I think that film in particular speaks to like a level of like ableism, and like white people being in thinking that they can tame this so-called wilderness or survive it. Yeah. And then Keanu, who was also in our group, brought up how like flipping the narrative and to not center, I guess like centering the narrative on like indigenous communities and things that they're going through. But yeah, either of them can continue to share what else they thought of. I was kind of in and out of the call.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. somebody from another group like to go? In our group, one thing that Jessica was bringing up was the importance of not relying only on the media, like only on things that are shared over the internet, and instead like finding ways to share discussion and stories in person was one thing we talked about.
Yeah. Like I had brought up how in so-called Dallas, there's like a group that does like, they do book clubs, but they don't do book clubs necessarily like in a like building. They do them kind of like on the sidewalk or on the side of the street. That way people are able to like see that a book club is happening, and they can just like join in whenever they want to. And that there isn't necessarily a specific book. It's more of like a topic. So you could bring in any piece of media. I also mentioned this like one performance that was like started in Chile to kind of like bring in the discussion of gendered violence and femicide against like women and men.
Do you want me to like wait in the drive through or like in one of the
it's called Un Violador en Tu Camino.
Carlos, except
And
for
I
bring a
could
mask.
put a link in the
Okay, cool.
chat of like a video. But it went really viral. Like there were performances like all over like Latin America and also like in Los Angeles and DC and places like that.
No, so Carlos, sorry.
I think filming and sharing narratives that way is one idea that's a good I will watch that afterward. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. And yeah, one thing that I was thinking about was like filming an open mic or artistic events could be another way to share your narrative about an issue without going directly for protest footage. But anyone else from other groups have more thoughts on that? Yeah, some other thoughts are interviews that share people's individual stories, obviously with their consent. But if, for example, if somebody was injured at a protest and they want to share their story publicly, that's something you could do. Or just people who are deeply involved with an issue. And other ideas are an explanatory video that maybe shares some mini interviews and clips from different events and variety of things to talk about, as someone mentioned in my group, to talk about the overall goals of a campaign. So not just focused on one day, one event, but about the broader picture told through like a variety of different kinds of footage put together. Or it could be about your celebration of a success, with people speaking to that and how you got to that point, celebrating your victory as a community, and sharing some lessons that could benefit other people who are also immersed in social struggles. Anyone else have other thoughts that they didn't get a chance to share yet?
I didn't end up in any of the breakout rooms, but I think something that I've just been thinking about, and I don't do any film work, but I think it's really important that we document and record our own like histories, because I think there's this idea that like whoever controls history or controls a story often has the most power. And not that we're here to like get and amass power or even like control the history, but like I think it's really important that we document like our successes and also our struggles, for also like future generations to like go back to, and like refer back to and know that like what was successful and what wasn't, and to also like even know that there was success, because I feel like so often we get stuck in this narrative of like oppression and scarcity, but it's really important to know that in the past that there was more than that. So that's just something I was thinking about.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Yes, absolutely. Sharing those histories and yeah, centering the people who have been on the front lines and yeah, in those stories. Yeah.
And to Lyrica's point, when they were speaking, I was reminded of, I don't know if you guys know Chamada, but she has released this like transcript about the dangers of a single story, and just like as we're talking about this, it just reminded me of that and how detrimental like telling narratives and stories from a single perspective can be dangerous.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing I think is important to think about too is this your story to tell, or is there somebody else who's best positioned to tell that story? And if so, like, maybe it's you step back and or offer support if you think that they might want it. But yeah, that's one thing that I think is always super important. Which I meant to say earlier in terms of protest stuff, but also just in general. And yeah, yeah, and I think yeah, also centering those again who have been on the front lines and marginalized by struggles that we're trying to spread the word about. But sometimes it's best to kind of work as a partner with somebody else and yeah, just play like a supportive role. Oh, sorry. Oh, thanks. Sorry, I was just trying to get at the chat. Share my screen again. So just a few key takeaways. It's always important to get consent from others about your ideas, to try to practice using good judgment in the moment, thinking on your feet, and always being ready to adapt how you're doing things or what sort of piece you produce. Working together with other people you trust and making decisions together, just getting a few brains together to think through what's the best thing is to do with the footage you have, is always best, I think. And then practicing good security culture with your personal equipment and the media that you create as well. Thinking outside of the box about types of shots or footage to get and types of narratives to share, because it doesn't always have to be that that footage of a protest that tells us the kind of story that you want to tell. There are lots of types of stories that we can tell from different angles. So yeah, again, there's no blanket right answer, but these are just hopefully some prompts to get us all thinking more about these questions as we're either creating media or organizing with others who do. So thank you everyone for joining. I know that time is up. Thanks so much for being here.
Cool. Thank you so much, Melanie. Thank you all who joined. We'll see you all later. Have a good day.
You too. Thanks so much, Erica.
Bye.